Welcome to Some TV Movie Channel, your home for amazing movies and non-stop entertainment. Get ready to enjoy blockbuster hits, timeless classics, and exciting stories from every genre. Whether you love action, drama, comedy, or adventure, there's always something to watch here. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the latest uploads. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the movie experience with Some TV Movie Channel. Arrival is a 2016 American science fiction drama film directed by Denis Villeneuve and written by Eric Heisserow, based on Ted Chiang's 1998 short story Story of Your Life. The film stars Amy Adams as Louise Banks, a skilled linguist recruited by the United States Army to establish communication with mysterious extraterrestrial visitors who have arrived on Earth before global tensions escalate into conflict. Jeremy Renner, Forest Whitaker, and Michael Stuhlbarg appear in supporting roles. Arrival premiered at the Venice Film Festival on September 1, 2016, before receiving a theatrical release in the United States by Paramount Pictures on November 11, 2016. The film earned $203 million worldwide and received widespread critical acclaim, with particular praise for Amy Adams' powerful performance, Denis Villeneuve's direction, and its thoughtful exploration of language, communication, and humanity's relationship with extraterrestrial intelligence. Regarded as one of the finest films of 2016, Arrival appeared on numerous year-end critics' lists and was selected by the American Film Institute as one of the top 10 films of the year. The movie received 8 nominations at the 89th Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Cinematography, and Best Adapted Screenplay, ultimately winning the Oscar for Best Sound Editing. Amy Adams earned several award nominations for her performance, including recognition from the BAFTA Awards, Screen Actors Guild Awards, and Critics' Choice Awards. At the 74th Golden Globe Awards, Adams was nominated for Best Actress, while composer J.A. Hansen received a nomination for Best Original Score. The film also won the Ray Bradbury Award for Outstanding Dramatic Presentation and the Hugo Award for Best Dramatic Presentation in 2017. J.A. Hansen's score was later nominated for Best Score Soundtrack for Visual Media at the 60th Annual Grammy Awards. The story begins when 12 mysterious alien spacecraft appear above different locations across Earth. As fear and uncertainty spread around the world, governments send teams of military personnel and scientists to investigate the visitors and uncover their purpose. Among them is Louise Banks, whose extraordinary understanding of language becomes humanity's greatest hope for communicating with the unknown beings and preventing a potential global war. In the United States, Army Colonel Weber recruits linguist Louise Banks and physicist Ian Donnelly to investigate the alien spacecraft hovering above Montana. Inside the craft, Banks and Donnelly make contact with 2 7-limbed, cephalopod-like extraterrestrials, whom they name Heptapods. Donnelly gives them the nicknames Abbott and Costello. Together, they begin studying the Heptapods' complex written language, which is made up of circular symbols containing multiple meanings. Their findings are shared with research teams from other countries around the world. As Banks becomes more familiar with the alien language, she begins experiencing strange, flashback-like visions involving her daughter. When she develops enough shared vocabulary to ask the Heptapods why they have come to Earth, their response is translated as "off a weapon." China interprets this as "use weapon," causing them to end communication with the aliens, and other nations soon follow. Banks argues that the symbol translated as "weapon" may have a broader meaning, representing concepts such as a tool or a means to achieve something. She believes China's misunderstanding may have resulted from their attempts to communicate with the Heptapods through the highly competitive game of mahjong, which influenced their interpretation of the word. Meanwhile, the Russian team receives a message that they translate as "there is no time," which they interpret as a possible threat. In Montana, rogue soldiers secretly plant a bomb inside the alien spacecraft. Unaware of the danger, Banks and Donnelly return to the vessel, where the Heptapods reveal a more advanced part of their message. Moments before the explosion, one of the aliens ejects Banks and Donnelly from the craft, saving their lives but leaving them unconscious. When they awaken, they discover that the Heptapod spacecraft has moved out of reach. The US military begins preparing for a possible alien response, fearing retaliation. Meanwhile, General Chiang of China issues an ultimatum to the spacecraft above his country, demanding that it leave within 24 hours. Russia, Pakistan, and Sudan soon make similar demands. As global panic spreads, communication between the international research teams is cut off. Donnelly discovers that the symbol for time appears repeatedly throughout the Heptapods message. He also notices that the written symbols occupy exactly 1/12 of the three-dimensional space into which the message is projected. Banks realizes that the complete message has been divided among the 12 alien spacecraft, and that the Heptapods' true intention is to encourage humanity to work together in order to understand it. Banks travels alone to the Montana spacecraft, which sends down a transport pod to meet her. She discovers that Abbott has been severely injured from the explosion. Costello explains that the Heptapods came to help humanity because, 3,000 years in the future, they will need humanity's assistance in return. Banks finally understands that the weapon they offered is not a physical object, the weapon is their language itself. By learning the Heptapods' language, humans gain the ability to perceive time in a non-linear way, experiencing future events as if they were memories. Banks realizes that her visions of her daughter were not memories but glimpses of the future. Her daughter, Hannah, has not yet been born. Banks returns to the military camp as it is being evacuated and explains to Donnelly that the Heptapods' language was the tool referred to by the word weapon. She then experiences another vision of a future United Nations event celebrating global cooperation after humanity successfully deciphers the Heptapods' language. At the event, General Chiang thanks Banks for convincing him to stop the attack. He reveals that she had called his private number and repeated his wife's final words, which changed his decision. Chiang shows her the number and whispers his wife's words to her, explaining how she was able to prevent a global conflict. In the present, Banks takes CIA agent Halpin's satellite phone and calls Chiang's private number, repeating the words she learned from her future vision. China announces that it will stand down and shares its portion of the alien message. The other nations follow, and the 12 spacecraft eventually leave Earth. Using her knowledge of the Heptapods' language, Banks writes and publishes a book titled The Universal Language, a guide to the Heptapod language. Her work will eventually help humanity understand time in the same way as the Heptapods do. During the evacuation, Donnelly confesses his love for Banks. They discuss the choices people make in life and whether they would change them if they knew their entire future. Banks already knows that she will choose to have a child with Donnelly, despite knowing the pain that awaits them. She knows that Hannah will die from an incurable illness and that Donnelly will eventually leave after discovering that Banks knew their daughter's fate from the beginning. As they embrace, Banks reflects on the final time Donnelly will ever hold her. Arrival is based on Ted Chiang's 1998 science fiction novel Story of Your Life. The story explores humanity's first communication with the Heptapods, mysterious extraterrestrial beings whose unique language challenges the way humans understand time, memory, and existence. Screenwriter Eric Heisserer first discovered Ted Chiang's work through another one of Chiang's stories, which led him to explore more of the author's collected writings. When he read Story of Your Life, the emotional impact of the story deeply affected him. Inspired by its themes, Heisserer decided to adapt it into a screenplay because he wanted to introduce the story to a much wider audience. After completing an initial spec script, Heisserer spent several years pitching the project to different production companies, but he struggled to find anyone willing to take it on. Many studios rejected the idea, believing the material was too complex and intellectual for a mainstream audience. Heisserer later explained that it was not until he successfully wrote and produced the 2013 film Hours that people began to take his work more seriously, as it proved he had the ability to bring challenging stories to life. Eventually, Dan Levine and Dan Cohen from 21 Laps Entertainment became interested in Heisserer's screenplay. Producer Sean Levy explained that the company had discovered Story of Your Life around 2011 and recognized its potential after reading Heisserer's adaptation. They worked closely with him to refine the screenplay before beginning the search for a director and a distribution partner. One of the directors approached by 21 Laps was Denis Villeneuve. Villeneuve had been interested in making a science fiction film for years but had never found the right project. When Cohen and Levine introduced him to Chiang's novella, he immediately connected with the story. However, because he was busy working on Prisoners, he did not have enough time to collaborate with Heisserer on the early screenplay process. Heisserer completed the first draft, which he and Villeneuve later revised together into the final version. Villeneuve decided to change the title because he felt Story of Your Life sounded like the name of a romantic comedy and no longer represented how different the screenplay had become from the original short story. After considering hundreds of possible titles, Arrival was the first suggestion from the production team that everyone connected with. During the adaptation process, Heisserer made several significant changes from his original screenplay to the final version. The biggest change was making the arrival of the Heptapods a global first contact event. He believed this created the necessary tension, uncertainty, and conflict required for a feature film. Heisserer also revealed that earlier drafts featured a different ending. Originally, the Heptapods' gift was planned to be blueprints for an advanced interstellar spacecraft, similar to an ark, which humanity would eventually use to help them thousands of years in the future. However, after the release of Interstellar in 2014, Heisserer and Villeneuve felt that idea no longer worked. They decided that the true gift from the Heptapods should be the thing already presented in front of humanity, the extraordinary power of their language. Amy Adams began negotiations to star in the film in April 2014 and was officially confirmed before Jeremy Renner joined the project in March 2015. Forest Whitaker signed on in April, followed by Michael Stuhlbarg in June. To prepare for her role as linguist Louise Banks, Adams worked with linguist Jessica Kuhn to better understand the field and approach her character realistically. Principal photography lasted 56 days, beginning on June 7, 2015, after Renner completed his commitment to Captain America: Civil War. Filming took place mainly in and around Montreal, Quebec, with Saint-Fabien, Quebec, standing in for Montana. Finding the right location for the spacecraft landing site was a major challenge. The filmmakers wanted a location that would not be overwhelmed by mountains, which could make the spacecraft appear smaller, but they also wanted to avoid a completely empty landscape that felt too predictable. Most scenes that did not involve the exterior of the alien craft were filmed on indoor sound stages. However, a real house in Champlain, Quebec, was used as Louise Banks' home. The university scenes where Louise teaches were filmed at the main campus of the Université Copyright de Montréal Copyright Hall, including locations such as HEC Montréal Copyright Hall's auditorium and cafeteria. Villeneuve selected cinematographer Bradford Young because he wanted someone who could create a realistic visual style using natural lighting. Villeneuve explained that he wanted the film to feel grounded and intimate, with a strong connection to reality rather than a traditional polished science fiction appearance. He admired the emotional quality and sensitivity found in Young's previous work. Young used color grading to reflect Louise's emotional state throughout the story. He explained that cooler tones were used when Louise was exhausted or emotionally distant. During the color timing process, Villeneuve encouraged him not to worry too much about maintaining perfect skin tones, allowing Louise's pale and melancholic appearance to become part of the film's visual storytelling. While discussing the film's style, Young described Villeneuve's goal as creating a dirty science fiction look, one that felt realistic, grounded, and almost ordinary rather than futuristic and flashy. Young also used the photography book Speedway by Martina Hoagland-Ivano as a visual reference for the film's atmosphere. Production designer Patrice Vermette discussed the film's visual design in a 2017 interview with Popular Mechanics, explaining that the work of production designer James Chinland was a major influence, especially in designing the interior of the alien spacecraft. Vermette wanted the environment to feel simple yet deeply sensory. The massive screen inside the spacecraft, which was already part of the script, became a central visual element connecting Louise's world. Vermette explained that the large white screen represented more than just a display. The room, referred to as the interview room in the script, was designed like a classroom. The same visual idea appeared throughout Louise's life, from the large window in her home to the board in her classroom, creating a connection between learning, communication, and understanding. Visual effects company Rodeo FX completed around 60 visual effects shots for the film. According to the company, one of the most challenging sequences was the moment when Louise and Ian first enter the alien spacecraft. Both Ted Chiang's original story and Heisserer's screenplay required the creation of a completely fictional alien language system. The film's circular alien writing was designed by artist Martine Bertrand, based on Heisserer's original ideas. Computer scientists Stephen and Christopher Wolfram analyzed the language concepts to help create the scientific foundation behind Louise's research in the film. Linguists from McGill University also contributed their expertise, while the alien speech sounds were developed with the help of phonetics expert Morgan Sander. Lisa Travis provided consultation on the design of the scientific workspaces, and Jessica Kuhn, a Canada research chair in syntax and indigenous languages, offered linguistic guidance during the screenplay development process. Through the collaboration of filmmakers, designers, scientists, and linguists, Arrival was able to create a believable world where language, science, and human connection became the heart of its science fiction story. Sizer said at the Alamo Drafthouse Ace Fantastic Fest premiere of Arrival at the end of September 2016 that Chiang's wife's last words translated into English were "In war, there are no winners, only widows." Renner decided not to include subtitles for the line. Sizer said he would have preferred it not be kept secret and was happy to reveal the translation. Johan Johansson began writing the score as the shooting started, drawing on the screenplay and concept art for inspiration. He developed one of the main themes in the first week using vocals and experimental piano loops. The original soundtrack was released by Deutsche Grammophon on November 11, 2016. Max Richter's pre-existing piece on the nature of daylight is featured in the film's opening and closing scenes. Due to the prominent use of jazz music, which had also featured in Martin Scorsese's film Shutter Island, Johansson's score was deemed ineligible for the Academy Award for Best Original Score. The rationale being that voters would be influenced by the use of pre-existing music when judging its merits. A teaser trailer was released in August 2016, followed the next week by the first official trailer. Paramount Pictures released a series of promotional posters, with one showing a UFO hovering above a Hong Kong skyline that included Shanghai's Oriental Pearl Tower. The inaccuracy angered Hong Kong social media users. The posters were withdrawn and a statement attributed the inaccuracy to a third-party vendor. In May 2014, while titled Story of Your Life, Paramount Pictures acquired US, Canadian, and Chinese distribution rights. Shortly after, Sony Pictures Worldwide Acquisitions acquired the international distribution rights, so excluding the UK, Australia, China, Greece, India, the Middle East, Turkey, and Israel. Entertainment One acquired a UK distribution rights while Roadshow Films acquired Australian distribution rights. Reliance Entertainment for India. Ultimately, it was MPA Entertainment that released it there. Left cinemas for Israel, Italia Film for the Middle East, Turkey and Greece, licensing rights to Chantia Films for Turkey and Spenkos Films for Greece. The film had its world premiere at the Venice Film Festival on September 1, 2016. It also screened at the Toronto International Film Festival, the Telluride Film Festival, and the Fire London Film Festival. The film was released on November 11, 2016. Arrival was released on digital HD on January 31, 2017, and on Ultra HD Blu-ray, and a DVD on February 14 the same year. Arrival grossed $100 million in the United States and Canada and $13 million in other countries for a worldwide total of $23 million against a production budget of $47 million. In the United States and Canada, Arrival was released alongside Almost Christmas and Shootin' and was originally expected to gross around $17 million from 317 theaters in its opening weekend, with the studio projecting a more conservative debut of $12 to $15 million. The film made $1.4 million from Thursday night previews at 944 theaters and $9.4 million on its first day, pushing projections up to $24 million. It ended up grossing $24.1 million over the weekend, finishing third at the box office. In its second weekend, the film grossed $12.1 million, a drop of 49.6%, and in its third made $11.5 million, dropping just 5.6%. Following its 8 Oscar nominations, the film returned to 221 theaters on January 27, 2017, an increase of 1,041 from the week before, and grossed $1.5 million, up $357.4% from its previous week's $321,411. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film has an approval rating of 94% based on 439 reviews with an average rating of 8.40. The website's critical consensus reads, ARF delivers a must-see experience for fans of thinking person sci-fi that anchors its heady themes with genuinely affecting emotion and a terrific performance from Amy Adams. On Metacritic, the film has a score of 81 out of 100 based on 52 reviews, indicating universal acclaim. Audience pulled by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of B on an A+ to F scale. Robbie Conn of The Telegraph praised the film, calling it introspective, philosophical, and existentially inclined, yet it unfolds in an unwavering tenor of chest-tightening excitement. And there is a mid-filmal revelation, less a sudden twist than a sleek unwinding of everything you think or you know that feels when it hits you like your seat is tipping back. Brianna Tallarico of Roku.com gave the film a 3 out of 4. It's a movie designed to simultaneously challenge viewers, move them and get them talking. For the most part, it succeeds. For Time, Sam Lansky called it a sophisticated grown-up sci-fi, a movie about aliens for people who don't like hear movies about aliens. IGN reviewer Chris Attilia gave it a score of 8.5 out of 10, saying, Arif is a language lesson masquerading as a blockbuster, though for much more entertaining than it sounds. It's smart, sophisticated sci-fi that asks big questions and does a pretty good job of answering them. Kenneth Duran of the Los Angeles Times praised Eda Adams's performance, writing, Arrival is really Adams' film, a showcase for her ability to quietly and effectively meld intelligence, empathy, and a reserve. Writing for USA Today, Brianna Trout called Adams a definite contender for the Oscar for Best Actress, saying she was spectacular in giving Louise the right emotional balance. Conversely, Forest Whitaker of Slate had a more mixed opinion of the film, praising the cinematography and musical score, but writing that he thought it was similar to Christopher Nolan's on the intermittently stellar Interstellar and criticizing the dialogue as clunky. Reeks Reed, writing for the New York Observer, gave the film 1 out of 4, calling it Villeneuve's latest exercise in a pretentious poopery and referring to our lack of action in the storyline. The Guardian rated it the third best film of 2016. Critic Catherine Short said that it accounts to something transcendent, something to reignite your excitement for cinema, for life. Numerous other publications and websites including IO9, Den of Geek, Mere Fontes, Tiki, The Atlantic, Blast, and Digital Trends named Arrival the best film of 2016. In 2021, members of Writers Guild of America West, GAW, and Writers Guild of America East, GAE, ranked its screenplay 27th in UK's 101 greatest screenplays of the 21st century so far. In 2025, the film ranked number 29 in the New York Times list of the 100 best movies of the 21st century and number 20 on the Reader Choice edition of the list. David Edgar, professor of linguistics at Queen Mary University of London, had a favorable view of the accuracy of the linguistics in Arrival, saying, the portrayal of trying a different hypotheses about the language, coming up with generalizations, and testing them out was spot on. Similarly, Jessica, a linguistics professor who teaches at McGill University and helped with the film's linguistics, said, what the film gets so exactly right is both the interactive nature, but also that you really have to start small. She noted that the creators had not invented a complete language. Linguistics professor Betty Bernina, who teaches at Northern Illinois University, said that the film's use of the superior warfare hypothesis went beyond anything that is plausible. She also felt the film oversimplified the process so far translating the alien's language, skipping straight from Banks to establishing the basic vocabulary of the language to her being able to understand abstract concepts such as weapon. At the 89th Academy Awards, Arrival was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Cinematography, Best Production Design, Best Film Editing, Best Sound Mixing, and Best Sound Editing, winning the last. Adams was nominated for the Golden Globe Award for Best Actress in a Motion Picture, Drama, Actor International Award for Best Actress, BAFTA Award for Best Actress in a Leading Role, Screen Actors Guild Award for Outstanding Performance by a Female Actor in a Leading Role and the National Board of Review Award for a Best Actress, which she won. Composer Jon Johansson was nominated for Golden Globe Award for Best Original Score. I finally made it to the cinema to see Arrival last night, a couple of weeks after it came out to great acclaim, promising an intelligent take on first contact with an alien species with a particular emphasis on the linguistical business of deciphering the alien language and writing system. It was a film I was very eager to see. I hesitate to call myself a linguist proper just yet, but my current research is very much on the linguistic and writing systems end of archaeology, and I'm very interested in any film adaptations of far grown-up written science fiction. Arrival is based on a short story by Ted Chiang, so Arrival looked to be right up my alley. That said, some of my linguist friends were wary, fearful of how Hollywood would treat the era discipline despite the generally favorable reviews of Arrival's linguistic content. So, in the end, how did it all stack up? Was it the masterpiece several reviewers have hailed it as? Or was my friend's caution justified? The answer, it turns out, is somewhere in between. Arrival is a good film. I'll just put that out there right at the start. I'm not going to try and be contrarian and say it's anything other than a very well-made, interesting, and a thought-provoking science fiction movie. I'd wholeheartedly encourage people, including linguists, to see it, if for no other reason than that. It's the kind of film I'd like to see a lot more of. However, despite the marketing, the linguistics content, of which there is certainly plenty, is unfortunately no to its strongest aspect or ultimately the one it's most interested in. It's difficult to go into specifics without spoiling things, but suffice it to say that Arrival is a film of two halves. The second is clever, satisfying and affecting, upending expectations and tying things up in a neat bow, a characteristic of the best shorter stories. The first half, by contrast, the half mostly concerned with the translation of the alien language, feels baggy, a little slow, and the linguistic elements don't quite ring true. Going back to what I said in my essay on science fiction and archaeology, it feels very much like a scientist's imagining of what arts and humanities research is like rather than something fully grounded in research. Linguistics lecturers speak to vast lecture halls, beginning a day's class with things like, "Today we're going to learn about Portuguese and why it's so different from other Romance languages." Portuguese began in the Middle Ages when a language was considered an art form. Maybe it's different in America, but my linguistics education was mainly carried out in small rooms with small groups, lecturers going through the fine detail of morphology or phonology without mucus in the way of purple prose or rhetorical flourish. The film even seems a bit fuzzy on what exactly a linguist is. It's never clear what exactly a protagonist Dr. Louise Banks' specialism is, and the film seems to waver between envisaging her as a linguist in the sense of someone who studies linguistics and works on the structures of languages and a linguist in the sense of someone who knows and translates foreign languages. Everything from Mandarin to Farsi for a living. Ironically, these stumble over the ambiguity inherent in the word linguist is exactly the kind of thing Banks is so keen to avoid in her interactions with the aliens. Which brings me to the translation itself. I don't really want this review to be an exercise in nitpicking, but the Hurley method of understanding and translating the alien language doesn't really make a lot of sense. The fact that it's essentially being done by a single, apparently fairly junior linguist and our physicist who at no point does any actual physics rather than a huge international team of the world's best and brightest can perhaps be forgiven, as can the incredibly rapid pace of decipherment. But their method, essentially holding up a whiteboard with the words written on it and pointing at things, would struggle even with the cultural and conceptual differences on Earth, let alone with something fundamentally alien. But that's in or on the negative. As I've said, once the decipherment is accomplished, the film picks up a great deal and seems a lot surer of its footing. This is where I'm going to move into slightly more spoilerish territory, so feel free to stop here. Right, Arrival, it turns out, isn't really a film about translation at all so much as the effect that contact with the alien has on the human mind. It's an internal claustrophobic film full of extreme close-ups and very shallow depth of field. The strangeness of the aliens, their fundamental otherness, and the human struggle to cope with encountering that are all very well conveyed. These are not little green men, but something far more uncanny. Their half-glimpsed octopus spindle-fingered hand appearance here recalling the eldritch extraterrestrials of Lovecraft and his imitators, while still being distinctively different and memorably odd. But the main point of the film is with the effect of the alien language itself on human cognition, the so-called superior hypothesis. This comes in two flavors, strong and weak. The strong theory is that language determines the range of cognition, which has now been shown to be untrue. The weak theory argues that language has an influence on how people think, but stops short of complete determinism. That is fairly well supported by evidence. The theory has long been our favorite of science fictional treatments of linguistics. There aren't many of them, but almost all the ones that spring to mind deal with the idea to a large extent. Arrival is in some ways a response to Samuel Adelaide's 1966 novel Babel 17, which covers themes, albeit infused with our layer of Cold War paranoia. Its mouse alien language is in itself a weapon, causing its translators through the very act of understanding it to become the agents of their alien foes. More recently, China maybe turned the idea on its head in his excellent 2011 novel, A Embassy Town. Set in a long-standing human settlement on a world inhabited by extremely strange aliens without particularly odd language, it deals with the catastrophic upheavals wrought on the aliens' mindsets and culture by communicating with humanity. I'm not going to go into any detail about how the superior wolf theory plays out in Arrival because that really would be to spoil the fundamentals of the film. But I will say that it's both fascinating in its own right and leaves you asking a number of questions of yourself. I haven't yet read Ted Chiang's short story, A Story of Your Life, but the friend I went with had, and the differences he has cited explain a lot about the curious unevenness of Arrival. It seems that it's mostly the second half of the film that make up the short story, with the actual business of translation considerably fleshed out for the film. On the other hand, the short story features much more maths and physics. This would seem to suggest that the redundancy of the physicist character is anything other than Banks' unqualified assistant in Arrival and the rather scrappy and baggy first portion area problems of adaptation rather than the source material. I'll have to read Story of Your Life at some point and see whether that's borne out. So overall, Arrival thumbs up. Go for the linguistics. Stay for the interesting meditation on how contact with the other can change minds for the better. And hey, the world needs more of that right now. Much has been written about the recent surge of personal stories being told through the horror genre in films like It Follows, The Witch and The Babadook, but there's an equally interesting trend in the science fiction genre as well. Over the last few years, we've seen the genre used not only to examine the power of space travel or our post-apocalyptic future, but as a way to address common humanity more than futuristic adventure stories. Joining our films like Gravity, Interstellar, and The Martian is Denis Villeneuve's ambitious and moving Arrival, a movie that's about the day the universe changed forever, but becomes more focused on a single story even as it's expanding its worldwide narrative. It is more about a grief, time, communication, and a compassion than it is warp speed. And it's a film that asks questions. How do we approach that which terrifies us? Why is it important to communicate through a language and not action? The final actor of Arrival gets to the big ideas of life here that I won't spoil here, but viewers should know that Villeneuve's film is no to the crowd pleaser of The Martian, Ridley Scott's big TIFF premiere last year. It's a movie designed to simultaneously challenge viewers, move them, and get to them talking. For the most part, it succeeds. Amy Adams gives a confident to affecting performance as Louise, our linguistics expert brought in on the day that 12 unidentified flying objects enter Earth's orbit. Despite what they're telling the public, which is not much of anything at first, the governments of the world have made first contact with the creatures inside, beings that look vaguely like some higher power merged an octopus with a giant hand. Working with the military and a scientist named Ian Jeremy Renner, Louise seeks to find the answer to our very simple question. What do you want? The Heptapods, as they're eventually called, speak in sounds that echo wily noises at times, but Louise quickly learns that written language is the way to communicate, even deciphering the complex way the interstellar tourists write. As she gets closer and closer to being able to convey that crucial question in a way that it and its answer will be understood, the world's uneasiness continues. Will man's protective instinct kick in now before its science and language leaders can figure out a way to stop it? Lucy also has darkness in her life. The opening scenes detail the birth, brief life, and death of a child. Throughout, Adams imbues Louise with a quiet, effective emotional undercurrent that's so essential to the film's success. This is a movie that gets too sterile at times, but Adams is always there to ground it. Villeneuve's vision is not particularly gear-heavy, allowing Adams to work in a way that feels relatable. There's so much going on in this character's mind and her heart, especially in the twisty final act with which Adams could have gone big, but it's actually one of the more subtle and internal sci-fi movie performances that I've ever seen. And it's a testament to the success of Arrival that it's her face, not the impressive alien ship, creature designer that people will remember. As he has recently, Villeneuve understands the importance of surrounding himself with talented people. In this case, to the film's undeniable MVP's area cinematographer Bradford Young, the genius who shot Selma and The Most Violent Year, and composer Jon Johansson. The latter's compositions here are essential to every emotional beat of the film, defining the air of tension in the first half of the film and the moving undercurrents of the final act. Young's approach is beautifully tactile, using the natural world to make a natural story genuine. We may not be able to fully relate to Louise's narrative, but we can appreciate the image of a child running through a field. Young's imagery is fluid, unlike here the choppy blockbuster cinematography that we're used to seeing in sci-fi. Most importantly, it feels like everything here is of one vision: a cinematography, direction, acting, a score, etc. instead of the Factorio-produced blockbusters we've seen so far late. Despite all of that, Arrival sags a bit in the middle, a point when it might lose some viewers for good. The first to contact act is undeniably confident, and the final thematically purposeful scenes of the film are stunningly ambitious, but the pace of Arrival softens a bit too much in the middle, and one notices the sterility of the piece overall. Without spoiling anything, maintaining the shock value of the twists of the final act forces some narrative decisions in the midsection that keep you observers to the action of the film. We're ready to be participants. Villeneuve is a talented director, but this movie lacks a degree of heat that would have helped it hit the emotional and philosophical beats of the final scenes. As is, we often feel like we're behind the barrier that Louise uses when communicating with the alien creatures as she dubs Abbott and Costello, like she wants to do. We so want to take off the equipment and get behind that screen. Having said that, this is ambitious, accomplished filmmaking that deserves an audience. It's a film that forces viewers to reconsider that which makes us truly human and the impact of our grief-funded timeline of existence. At its best, and largely through Adam's performance, the film proposes that we've all had those days in which a communication breaks down and fear over the unknown sets in. And it is the best two of us who persevere, get up from being knocked down, and repair that which is broken. This may be what struck me most about this film, is how brilliantly it captures not just the theme and heart of the story that communication with aliens will be alien. It will be difficult and it will fundamentally change us. It also manages to capture the experience so far reading the story, which is non-linear, written in second-person point of view and which ought to have been unfilmable. The film is appropriately the story translated. You might, as I did, cry not just at the heart of the story but at the miracle of its impossible adaptation. The story, a talented linguist, Louise Banks, is called on to help initiate a communication with the aliens on board our mysterious craft that has stationed itself in Montana, one of 12 that have landed all over the world. Partnered with a astrophysicist and overseen by an increasingly paranoid military, Louise must find a way to communicate with the Heptapods, a species so fundamentally different from us that at first there seems no real basis of engagement until she begins writing and they write back. Soon after, Louise starts having visions or memories or maybe even prophecy. In fact, the film opens with the historia of Louise and her daughter Hannah, who dies tragically young. Only as the story progresses do we realize that historia hasn't happened yet. As Louise's understanding of heptapod writing increases, her perception of time and space changes. It's not so much that she sees the future, rather, she begins to experience her entire life simultaneously. Thus begins a race to see if Louise can convey and use what she has learned before human governments and military forces engage in typically stupid bouts of violence in the name of defense and safety. Story of Your Life, first published in 1998 and winner of the Nebula and Sturgeon Awards, is one of the most talked about short stories of the last 20 years. The film is a worthy adaptation and joins a small but significant list of peaceful first-to-contact movies. The Day the Earth Stood Still, 1951, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and Contact, all of which are some of my very favorite science fiction movies of all time. The primary cast, Amy Adams, Jeremy Renner, and Forest Whitaker, are understated and solid. Louise reminded me of two other woman scientists in cerebral science fiction films, Brian Stone in Gravity and Elia Roway in Contact. All driven, passionate, intelligent, career-focused women, and I feel like that it seems like a trope, one I could probably delve more into across both written and film science fiction. I'll just focus on these three movies. Gravity drove me a little bananas because despite its riveting focus on the difficulties of surviving in space carried by an engaging woman character, by the end of the story, it was abundantly clear that the grand adventure was primarily a metaphor for surviving grief, particularly the poignant grief of our mother for the death of her child. I wanted space adventure, and the grief seemed cliché. It wasn't the story I wanted. I brought friends to Arrival who had not read Story of Your Life, so unfamiliar with the source material and what they were getting into. They assumed the scenes of Louise and Hannah were flashbacks. They were fully immersed in the trip and trained to read Louise as a mother who has drowned her grief in her work. Only as the film progressed did Thea realize these aren't flashbacks. The child hasn't been born yet. I was delighted to see that along with everything else it does, Arrival neatly overturns audience expectations of our trope that was played with such a melodrama in Gravity. Arrival can be viewed as a metaphor for grief, for a grief is inescapable. But rather than subsuming the science-fictional conceit, the metaphor here is absolutely dependent on it. They're intertwined, not interchangeable. Arrival is a rather obvious successor to Contact and Ellie Arrowe, a conceptual ancestor for Louise Banks. But rather than seeking out alien contact as Arrowe has, Banks is thrown into it. And while Contact offers a benevolent, literally patriarchal, the alien Ellie makes contact with takes the form of her father. Imagining of advanced alien races who understand us, are looking for us, and will shepherd us into guru understanding of the universe. Arrival presents a much less comforting scenario. The Heptapods are so alien as to almost be outside our comprehension. I want to mention here that the Heptapods are beautiful. Their movements are believable, built out of whatever service of them as bone and muscle and sinew with the visible joints and sensible mechanics. Most importantly, they aren't typical Hollywood CG phantasms. They aren't designed to elicit a specific reaction from the audience, whether fear or revulsion or attraction. They simply are. This is the first contact movie I've seen that demonstrates just how amazingly difficult communicating with aliens are likely to be. Most films present aliens as invaders, conquerors, or would-be benevolent overlord scenarios where you understand because humanity has done those things itself. But to communicate with beings who have an entirely different outlook of time and space, beings who present the concept of gift but the linguists interpret it as weapon because that's what humanity is looking for, and fears. And yet the film, like the best peaceful first contact movies, unabashedly declares that attempting such communication is worthwhile and necessary and must be done with peace as the desired outcome. I imagine some fans of the short story will be annoyed at the intrusion of the larger world, politics, and paranoia into Louise's personal story. The addition of a plot about the Chinese government steering a violent confrontation and the explosive air sabotage planted by a disaffected soldier recalling the act of sabotage at about the same point in the plot in our Contact. This was the Hollywoodization we were worried about. But the addition of the wider world was necessary to expand such an intimate short story to the size and scope of an A-lister Hollywood movie. It doesn't betray the story's core. The exploration of time and emotion remain. The bulk of the film focuses on Louise, on her hands as she squeezes a tremor out of them, on her eyes as she encounters the heptapods, and as her gaze turns inward on some tangled thought. The film is more intimate than not, beginning and ending with her voice. Arrival gives us what we desperately need now. A mainstream movie featuring scientist characters in our story that celebrates problem solving in the name of peace and exploration. Part 2 of a trend that continues what we saw in Interstellar and The Martian. I hope Arrival is wildly successful, and there's a trend of intellectual, accessible, problem-solving science fiction in our mainstream movies continues. The very best directors can do anything. They aren't just locked in on a single genre. They master multiple essential ones. They also aren't filmmaking slaves to our single franchise. While they may operate within a franchise from time to time like Alfonso Cuarón did with Harry Potter and The Prisoner of Azkaban, they don't dedicate their careers to them. In 2017, director Denis Villeneuve will have made his first franchise film with Blade Runner 2049, a sequel to the Ridley Scott science fiction classic. Villeneuve into a household name for the general movie-going public, but for film buffs, he is one of the most recognized newer talents. I haven't yet been lucky or to watch many of his early Canadian films, but I have been able to watch everything he has made in the 2010s. Before Interstellar wasn't even a blip on my radar, but that film put him on the map, so to speak. With Interstellar made a heartbreaking film with an unbelievable climax. Honestly, even though I am a Dane, I believe Villeneuve and Canada were robbed of the Best Foreign Language Film award at the 83rd Academy Awards when Denmark and Susanne Bier won the Oscar for In a Better World. At the time of writing, Denis Villeneuve hasn't made a French-Canadian film since In Undies, but he hasn't lost his ability to entertain and amaze audiences. 2013 was a great year for Villeneuve as our two films that he directed were released, Enemy and Prisoners. Villeneuve went from making a heartbreaking drama to making two strong thrillers. In 2015, Villeneuve then graduated to making a cynical crime drama, Sicario, that was sadly overlooked when the nominees for Best Picture at the 88th Academy Awards were announced. I don't usually take these long to introduce the director of a film when I'm reviewing a film, but after having seen Arrival, I feel that Villeneuve deserves more recognition. I believe that he hasn't made a false move as our director since I started following his career this decade. That includes Arrival, which I believe is easily an ear of the best science fiction film so far this decade and one of the best films so far the year. For a very long time, I considered reading the short story which Arrival is based on before watching the film. Ultimately, I decided against it as I didn't want any aspect of a film spoiled for me, as I believe there are some of the most engaging and interesting films being made these decade. Arrival isn't all that different from what Villeneuve has made before, even though it is his first science fiction film as far as I'm aware. You see, while Arrival is an alien encounter film, it isn't the classic alien invasion blockbuster film. Earlier this year, Independence Day, resurgence saw humankind defending Earth from vicious aliens. And if that is the kind of film you're expecting from Arrival, then think again. Arrival isn't a bloated, action-packed science fiction franchise starter. No, Arrival is instead a smarter and challenging science fiction film that might be surprisingly understated to some. It tells a story about how we, on a planet with no person able to speak for every nation, might greet and communicate with aliens that suddenly arrive, so to speak. The central character in the film isn't the President of the United States or some soldier. Instead, the film follows our professor of linguistics as she tries to understand these aliens and find out why they've arrived. Now, there is much more to this film, but to write about those elements in this spoiler-free review I wouldn't be right, as Arrival does a fantastic job of really making me question how you view everything in the film at one crucial point. It might be a slow burn, but there is a significant and pleasing payoff in the thrilling and thought-provoking final act. The film makes a lot of really important points about teamwork, cooperation, and communication, but those points aren't really what make you think in the final act or after you leave the theater. That's all I can say here. If I were to point out which previous film Arrival reminded me of the most, it might actually be Enemy starring Jake Gyllenhaal. I wouldn't have thought that before I watched the film, but it does make a lot of sense. Of the films that I had seen Villeneuve do prior to Arrival, Enemy was definitely the toughest film to understand. I love Enemy a lot more than a lot of people do. And while that film is a psychological thriller, I don't think Arrival shares certain traits with the Enemy. In fact, there's a certain scene here in Arrival wherein they discuss the superior hypothesis that any fan of Enemy will recognize from that film. I love the way the film was shot. Villeneuve usually teams up with Roger Deakins, a legendary cinematographer, but the Arrival cinematographer is actually Bradford Young, one of the newer talents in that filmmaking position. Young has previously worked on Ava Davis Selma, and he is apparently going to be teaming up with Phil Lord and Chris Miller on Lucasfilm's Han Solo spin-off film. I also feel like I need to mention the wonderfully eerie and atmospheric musical score that the Icelandic composer Jón Jóhannsson made for this film. These scenes would be effective without it, but the score adds something quite indescribable to the film. I think that one of the wonderful moments in the film is when Amy Adams' character first sees the aliens. She is clearly shaken by the experience. And when that scene was over, I realized just how effective that scene was. It shook me too. The music builds when the helicopter that she is in lands by one of the spacecrafts. And that's just one of the other wonderful scenes where the music really adds a lot to the film. I also need to talk about Amy Adams, who gives us one of her best performances yet in Arrival. She masterfully plays a very capable and curious character, and she gives the standout performance here. It is pretty amazing how much Amy Adams has grown as an actress. I vividly remember the smile she put on my face in her first big film as the innocent and Gidget Brenda in Spielberg's Catch Me If You Can. Now, Adams is one of Hollywood's best leading ladies. This brings me to the things that I didn't like, and there isn't a lot to get to here. While I think both Jeremy Renner and Forest Whitaker do fine jobs here, I have the issues with both of them. I'm not sure what kind of accent Whitaker was going for here, but it took me out of the film at one point. Renner plays a theoretical physicist, but if you somehow mishear that, then I don't blame you. Renner's character doesn't do a lot really. The final problem I had with the film itself was that there was this one soldier that went rogue because of political propaganda he watched on television. The character doesn't do much else before going rogue, but what he does change to the film in a pretty significant way. And I didn't feel like it was a particularly realistic that he would have had the chance to go rogue. I'm really trying to not spoil anything, which is difficult. So, I'll leave it at that. I clearly loved Arrival, and now that I've thought it over a little bit, I think that it might be my favorite Denis Villeneuve film yet. It also might be my favorite alien encounter film of all time. I do think it's a film you need to watch more than once, and I look forward to getting that chance at some point in the future. Denis Villeneuve's 2016 film Arrival had been on my list for quite some time before I finally settled into it yesterday. Though I'd seen the trailers boasting Jon Johansson's darker cinematography and I'd heard about Amy Adams' superb performance. No surprise here that she dazzled me. As always, I had not read any spoilers about the film and was therefore shocked at the extent to which it flipped so many of my expectations. Arrival's world is a bleak and mysterious one. Even Louise Adams' spectacular home seems perennially dark, and her fondest, most beautiful memories of her daughter are touched with the bluish ozark-like tint. Everything in the film boils down to its themes of existential anxiety and the promise of eventual death for Louise's daughter, for humanity, and even for the immense heptapods. Furthermore, the motif of unwelcome foreign invasion permeates even the most real-world aspects of Arrival. Louise's daughter, Hannah, for instance, dies of a rare disease that appears to be some sort of cancer. The heptapods are not the only foreign invaders in this film. This pattern is present even in Louise's interactions with the creatures when they invade her thoughts with their black squid-like ink. Villeneuve and Chiang's Ted Chiang wrote the short story Arrival is based on called Story of Year, a life reimagination of what an alien invasion might look like as postmodern and minimalistic. The space shuttles, for instance, area dark shadow-like semicircles that we are only come to recognize as flying saucers at the end when they turn on their side and eventually disintegrate. Visual choices like this one contain elements of classic Cold War era sci-fi film, but Arrival space shuttles are updated for modern audiences who are by now desensitized to the flashing lights and indecipherable technology of aliens. Allah, The Day the Earth Stood Still. Wise, 1951. After decades of the same tropes about aliens, we now need something darker, and familiar, and more ominous to elicit uncertainty or dread. For this reason, much about the heptapod sources remains unexplained. There is no exposition scene that explains the laws of gravity inside their sources. Sometimes characters can stand, other times they float, how the military knows how to enter them, or what exactly the screen is between where the humans stand and where the aliens live. Furthermore, there is a tremendous incongruity between what the ship's size appears to be from the outside and what it actually is on the inside. How big are these ships exactly? And perhaps most baffling, how do these tremendous heptops manage to fit inside such seemingly slim structures? Very little is explained for us in this film, and that is what makes it so unnerving. Indeed, I have seen it listed with other horror films of this cinematic generation such as The Witch at Garza 2015, It Follows Mitchell 2015 and The Babadook Kant 2014. Although Arrival is certainly not our horror film itself, it is predicated on fear and existential dread. Renner provides us with piecemeal information just enough for us to cling loosely to this multi-layered non-linear narrative, but presented in a manner that inevitably leaves us just as disoriented as the cinematography within the space shuttle does. In short, Arrival sets its tone by letting its visuals, its haunting soundtrack, and its actors' subtle physicality do the talking. And the sum of these parts amounts to a core human fear, a nihilistic sense of far meaninglessness in terms of both our individual lives and our species as a whole. Arrival suggests that our lives are out of our control. After all, the heptapods demonstrate to Louise what Einstein told us decades ago, that time is non-linear. The past, present, and future are happening to us simultaneously on planes just out of our reach and far beyond our understanding. We perceive time as our linear for our own sanity, a quality which seems to unravel for Louise as the heptapods drop visions of the future into her mind. Arrival once again is not a horror film, but it belongs in the same conversation as its horror counterparts precisely because of its exploration of our universal temporal, existential nightmare. My final note on this film is its political context. Marketed and released in the shadow of the 2016 presidential election that Donald Trump infamously won, Arrival calls into question the solidity of the American government as well as international diplomacy. At one point, Agent Halpin, played by Michael Selba, tells Louise, "We're a world with no single leader," and his words carry meaning beyond the story's alien invasion and even beyond the film itself. As the global community transitions from solidarity to stubborn individualism, I cannot help but think of the seemingly impenetrable world of international relations and the impossible process of creating and enforcing global agreements. I was also equal parts intrigued and amused by the global powers mentioned in the film and the way they reacted to the Heptapods invasion. China, for instance, is the first nation to settle on aggression against the aliens, and its military leader, General Chiang, belligerently resists any talks of peace. At the same time, the Russian government kills an heir of its own in order to retain the security of government information. These struck me as more than coincidental for a movie released in the midst of controversy over a possible and alas eventual trade war with China as well as our concern over Russia's secrecy and its handling of information. The only other countries named as particularly aggressive and uncooperative as the film heads to its climax are Pakistan and Sudan, both of whom have also had strained relations with the United States over the past decade over concerns of terrorism and national security. Arrival's grounding in our contemporary politics is not unique. See Melanie Malister's analyses of Americana films on the Middle East. But what struck me is Villeneuve's subtle handling of international relationships and the attention he gave to the disparate concerns over each of these countries. The United States military, by contrast, is characterized as warlike and misogynistic. Leaders constantly talk down to Louise, even when asking for her expertise. When the Heptapods first arrive, they belittle her, question her conclusions, and override her decisions, making this a movie, in many ways a classic story of men mansplaining to an intelligent, qualified woman in the workplace. Let us note that Rebecca Solid coined the term mansplaining just 2 years before this film came out. And once again, that Arrival hit theaters in the wake of the Clinton-Trump debates. The American military also makes the decision to bomb the inside of the Heptapods so while Louise and Ian, played by Jeremy Renner, are in it. This epitomizes the brash American cowboy trope that defines how Americans are received and portrayed internationally. In fact, it reminded me of the way Americans are characterized in Eye of the Skyhood. 2014, valuing violence over communication, fully aware of yet apathetic to the potentially tragic consequences of their hasty decisions. Americans are also portrayed in both films as painfully arrogant, exemplified most potently in Arrival when Connor Webber, played by Forest Whitaker, referred to Europeans as a more advanced race than Australian Aborigines. Although in saying this he implied that the Heptapods were more advanced than humans. His military position and a combative attitude against the Heptapods implies that he still believed in the potential of American military superiority. His words also demonstrated his belief in Western, in this case, red white superiority over indigenous peoples. An ironic and baffling thing for a black character to say. It is not hard to understand why Arrival made Steven Schneider's 1001 movies to see before you die. It is not only a compelling exploration of what first contact might look like in today's America, but it also sheds light on the political, social, and existential undercurrents that haunt the contemporary psyche. While the film's non-linear plot structure was intriguing and thematically appropriate, my only complaint is that it made the film exhausting to follow at times. This is its chief flaw. Though this complexity and the intellectual endurance it calls for does admittedly make the ending all the more satisfying and all the more terrifying. Denis Villeneuve's Arrival is an intellectually rigorous science fiction film that'll make you cry. That's no easy feat. Most hard science fiction films are full of ideas but light on emotion and don't even try for a catharsis. They want to dazzle our brains, not our hearts. The king of hard sci-fi 2001, A Space Odyssey, instills the viewer with the war, but its most emotional character is an artificial intelligence program. It's a not a 3 Kleenex sweep. Only a few films like Robert Zemeckis' Contact and Christopher Nolan's Interstellar manage to be about big ideas while also touching us in more intimate ways. We can now put Arrival alongside those two films as a rare example of hard science fiction that looks beyond the human pale while also fundamentally being about the choices we make in our lives and the reasons we have for living. It's a beautiful film as formally precise as you'd expect from Villeneuve, but as touching and even transcendent as our Terrence Malick film. The central figure for Arrival is Amy Adams' Louise Banks. After 12 alien spacecrafts arrive around the globe, the U.S. Army recruits Louise to learn how to communicate with the aliens so they can determine their motives for coming to Earth. She's paired with Anna Donnelly, Jeremy Renner, an astrophysicist, and together they strive to learn to communicate with the visitors before rival nations like China aggressively act to defend the planet. As Louise begins to learn the aliens' language, she starts to comprehend the world differently. Memories of her daughter's life and untimely death begin to haunt her more frequently. Based on Ted Chiang's Story of Your Life, Arrival posits the idea that language shapes how we think. The thesis goes that instead of merely being a tool for communication, language actually shapes our reality. Instead of manipulating a narration and tense like the short story does, Villeneuve accomplishes this argument by manipulating cinematic language. Flashbacks, sound design, and repetitive editing all add up to a grand statement about life late in the film. Aside from its intellectual and emotional heft, Arrival is simply an excellent formula work. It is terrifically shot by Selma cinematographer Bradford Young and again utilizes the audio prowess of composer Jan Johansson and sound editor Sylvania Belmer. The introductory scenes of the alien spacecraft are perfect examples of Villeneuve's craft. Villeneuve thrives off attention. Like in Sicario and Prisoners, every new shot in Arrival extends the attention of the last. His camera is almost always moving, slowly pushing in on the actors and subconsciously twisting our nerves. In the earlier minutes of the film, Villeneuve hides any clear view of the alien ships. Instead, he builds up anticipation as we're left to watch characters staring gobsmacked at hidden screens depicting this historic event. Only when Louise is escorted by helicopter to the military base in Montana beneath the craft do we see it in its entirety. In an extremely wide shot, the helicopter approaches the spacecraft which looks like a gargantuan black egg vertically. Mist clouds thin air and Johansson's horns blare out our pulsing tone. The moment is awe-inspiring. Later, when Louise and Ian aboard the craft, Villeneuve shows every step in their journey from base to craft. He shows them getting immunization boosters, gearing up in hose suits, and loading into trucks. When they get to the ship, the camera seems to crawl across the stark walls of the alien vessel, slowly pushing towards the blinding white light at the top. He stretches out the introduction as long as possible. As the characters use a hydraulic lift to enter the ship, their gravity starts to shift and they find themselves able to walk vertically up the walls. In one of the year's most remarkable shots, the characters jump from a standing position on the lift and shift midair to a standing position on the wall perpendicular to the lift. Venera doesn't cut in the midst of the jump. Instead, the gravity reorients in the midst of the camera move, making the effect all the more stunning. We're left dazzled and wondering how they possibly could have pulled it off. Arrival is full of this kind of precise, stunning filmmaking. It's a film made by our master craftsmen full of ideas that are genuinely profound. If you're able to go along with its central conceit, Arrival will prove of the year's most rewarding films. We are, it seems to me, living in a great day for science fiction movies. Rather than solely having to subsist on massive operatic space battles, which don't get me wrong, can be great, we also get thinking science fiction. We get movies that ask what it is to be human and whether that's changing. Movies that ask, at least scientifically, what it might be like to be the solely inhabitant of another planet. And now our film that asks what might happen if our aliens actually arrive and neither we nor the aliens instantly start blasting. This last entry is the new film from director Denis Villeneuve. Arrival, which features Amy Adams, Forest Whitaker, and Jeremy Renner, is quite a feat. Its focus is the obvious language barrier that occurs when 12 alien ships land here on Earth. Adams' Louise Banks is a linguist too and finds herself brought to the Renner spaceship which landed on US soil by Whitaker's Colonel Weber. Working with the scientist Ian Donnelly, Renner, Banks puts together a plan to communicate with other beings which resemble an octopus Buta with only 7 legs, and at the same time has to explain to the military and therefore us just why she is approaching it in the manner she has chosen. It eyes the back and forth between Banks and the aliens, which is the single most fascinating aspect of the film. She is ushered into their ship, which has its own gravity setup, and finds the aliens are behind this clear wall emerging through a mist. Not only does she nearly keep Hero cool, but she actually manages to make headway, and does so despite the location, odd schedule the aliens maintain, and constant questioning due to her supervisors who are anxious for her answers. Arrival is perhaps best described as intellectual film. It definitely has an emotional aspect, one which I would argue is the singly weakest element of the film, particularly the movie's postscript. Due to it mainly keeps the viewer at an emotional arm's length, delving into a process and progress, not feelings. And now that I've said that, I'll walk it back a little. There is definitely an emotional core, hence the ability for that postscript to exist, which is why the movie opens with the sad story of Banks' daughter. But it is feeling that is deeply wrapped inside thinking Renner walls us off from emotion much in the same way as Banks. The pacing is no small part of this either. The movie is at once both urgent and slow. Whitaker and the government need to know what is happening with the aliens, why they are there, what are the other ships telling people in other countries, what do the aliens want. Banks though won't be rushed. Can't be rushed for her. The process of learning to speak to the aliens is going to take as long as it takes. There is nothing that can be done yet to make it happen more quickly. As the movie methodically approaches its conclusion, and as Banks learns to communicate with the aliens, which come here to be known as heptapods, more and more effectively, the sense of urgency only grows. Perhaps it has been slowly building from the beginning, but as the conclusion approaches, the tension which exists on multiple levels is palpable. By the time the whole thing ends, the viewer simply wants to go back and watch it all from the beginning to see what they missed, to see if it all makes more sense, and to wonder at everything from the beauty of the sound design to the structure of the ship to the greater performance given by Adams. With Arrival, Villeneuve takes this big idea, the arrival of aliens, and strips it down to a couple of core questions, making it something small and manageably and just as important. Added to it are some fine actors realistically at portraying what the experience of our scientist in that situation might actually be. The result is a film that makes one think, makes one wonder, and makes one question just how poorly our world would actually react in such a situation. It has been almost 40 years since Steven Spielberg made Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That's no to a Spielberg film that people tend to revisit the way they do Jaws or Raiders or E.T. In its time, though, Close Encounters cast a spell of majestic awe that still reverberates through pop culture. There have of course been a number of alien visitation films since here, but whenever one comes along, contact a Science District 9, Interstellar, Spielberg's own The War of the Worlds, it always feels at the time like a major event, and then in hindsight it ends up seeming like a rerun. Close Encounters, with its obsessiveness and mystery, it's a spaceship of light that seemed as big as a city, is still the film that set the template that made the prospect of an extraterrestrial visit look as wondrous and eccentric and ominous and as spectacular as we imagined it might be. So you have to say this for Arrival, a solemnly fantastic tale of our highly enigmatic alien visit that premiered today at the 73rd International Venice Film Festival. The film has been made by the intensely gifted director Denis Villeneuve with an awareness that we've already been through this more than enough times, and that the definition of an alien movie, or at least one that's trying to be a serious piece of sci-fi and not just our popcorn lark like Independence Day, so that it's going to hypnotize us with something that appears extraordinary because it's altogether unprecedented. For a while, Arrival succeeds in doing that. Villeneuve, the director of Sicario and Prisoners, has made our grounded deep dish authenticity his calling card, and in the early scenes of Arrival, he hooks us by playing the news of spaceships hovering over Earth in the most low-key, randomly unsensational way possible. There are TV anchors blaring and news reports in the background, a dulling sense of chaos and fear. Mostly we're taking it all in through the eyes of Dr. Louise Banks, Amy Adams, a linguistics professor who has to tutor her class short and then wanders through the parking lot in a daze. Then an army colonel shows up in her office to recruit her help, but instead of the usual blustery movie military officer, he's played by Forest Whitaker tossing out lines in a croaky semi-whisper, which it turns out to be a lot more intriguing. He then plays a recording of the attempt that has been made so far to communicate with the aliens, who respond with what sound like the voices of whales. It's all very spooky and captivating. The aliens have parked spaceships in 12 locations around the world, including America, Russia, China, and Pakistan. And Louise is taken to the one in the United States, a vast green meadow in Montana, surrounded by hills and rolling clouds, where the ship hovers like a silent mile-high version of a smooth obsidian egg that's been cut in two. The images are stately and vast with an almost super-earthly clarity. It's Louise's job to draw on her language skills to find a way to communicate with the aliens. And to that end, she's teamed with Dr. Ian Connolly, Jeremy Renner, a theoretical physicist with a cut and dried view of things. Renner's role is rather modest, and he looks almost sheepish about it. But Adams draws on her gift for making each and every moment quiver with discovery. The actress is alive to what's around her, even when it's just ordinary. And when it's extraordinary, the inner fervor she communicates is quietly transporting. Villeneuve builds our anticipation with greater flair as the two world experts stand beneath the ship, waiting for it to open. They are then ushered into what looks like an abandoned elevator shaft with walls made of carbon where gravity disappears. They walk straight up and sideways. At last, they come to our rectangle of light, which turns out to be a clear pane behind which the aliens appear, shrouded in billows of smoky white. Do I even have to say spoiler alert? Discovering what the aliens in Arrival look like, sound like, and how they communicate is the dramatic heart and soul of the picture, a drama of elegantly hushed and heightened anticipation that Villeneuve stages with a maximum cunning. No, the aliens aren't anthropomorphic creatures who speak in our subtitles. They are tall black squid-like figures with 7 spindly legs. At least that's what they look like from the bottom. For a long time, we don't see their upper halves, and those legs up close look like giant bony hands with their fingers pointed down and planted on a table. They're dubbed heptapods. And to talk, this is the movie's single coolest invention. One of their digits will point up, opening into a squish 7-pointed star that emits what looks like black smoke or squid ink into the air. The smoke then forms into our circular ink blot, a word. It's Louise's job to decipher that language so that she can ask them the all-important question: why on earth have you come here? All this time, there's our relatively conventional brink of war drama transpiring in the background, a ratcheted up by internet paranoia and our rushed limbo-like figure barking away on our YouTube. Given that the whole global military thing has been at the forefront of virtually every alien invasion thriller, you're grateful that it is in the background. Unfortunately, it doesn't stay there. Villeneuve has just figured out a way to hold off the conventionality by downplaying it for a while. As intriguing as the alien language is, a cross between hieroglyphs and smokier signals, the way that Louise actually starts to comprehend it is murky and abstract. She acquires a primitive vocabulary of circular signs, at which point the aliens seem willing to communicate their big message, which says something to the effect of "off a weapon." It's not at all clear what that means. But one is fairly certain they're not trying to sell advanced military hardware to Low Martin. In the tradition of Close Encounters, DC seem like big aliens. Otherwise, why wouldn't they just attack? True to its title, Arrival makes an absorbing spectacle of the initial alien setup, alternately stoking and satiating our curiosity. The aliens don't quite have your personalities, but there's still something tender and touching about them. There are also, frankly, elements of familiarity. The sounds they low blasting moans are louder than a pipe organ echo the sounds are made by the ship in Close Encounters. When we first see the alien squid-like ear legs, they look a lot like the alien tentacles in the War of the Worlds. And the more closely we look at them, the more they look like gigantic versions of our ETS fingers. The point being that even though Verve is a bold filmmaker when it comes to this subject, Spielberg's vision is hard to get away from. It still somehow infuses everything. As the audience gets used to the aliens, the film enters a zone where it needs to do something more with them, something charged and fascinating. Instead, it does two things that are less than that. First, it begins to fire you back on the military showdown cliches as China acting alone makes a decision to draw a line in the stratospheric sand, announcing that it will now greet the aliens with force. Can the world work together? One hopes in this sort of event that it could, but that situation has been played out in movies before. The second wayward idea is that the alien language, all of those circly words, turns out to be their great gifter to Earth. The movie plays off the notion that if you learn a new language, it kinda rewire the way you think. The alien language offers such a kick of rewiring that it actually alters the nature of our time. The audience's reaction to this is likely to fall somehow on the spectrum between woe and ha in Arrival. It's a muddled idea, intriguing but not really developed. Yet, the film ties it in with a backstory that frames the action about Louise and the daughter who in an extended prologue she watched grow into adulthood and die. There's a surprising circularity to the structure of Arrival that some may find pleasing, but there's also a circular logic to it. The aliens have come to offer a weapon, which isn't really a weapon. It's a new way to order a time, but the only one it seems to apply to is Louise, which makes the whole purpose of their visit seem an awfully far-fetched conceit. At its best, Arrival has an eerie grandeur, but the film starts off as Neo Spielberg, it winds up as Neo Christopher Nolan meets Neo Terrence Malick. It turns into Anna Ezzat's mind bender. You feel you've had a close encounter with what might have been an amazing movie, but not actual contact. The sci-fi genre is truly a competitive field. Sometimes many films go over the top with their interpretation of alien encounters. Nevertheless, I was genuinely amazed when I watched Arrival. It's a well-worked piece of movie making and it takes you into another sphere of blow to experience with slight traits from Ridley Scott's Alien, Steven Spielberg's A Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and H.G. Wells' classic tale, The War of the Worlds. Arrival was an in-depth exploration in what alien contact could be like, and it certainly excelled in that aspect. With direction by the talented Denis Villeneuve, Arrival is based on a short tale story of your life here by Ted Chiang. The main focus of the plot revolves around Dr. Louise Banks, played diligently by Amy Adams. Her life seems to be a days of haunting memories and poignant experiences about her dead daughter which seem to go on and on like a never-ending dream from which she cannot awake. The pain there represent it away at her in her present-day life, but Dr. Louise Banks tries to put these sore memories aside by concentrating on her occupation in teaching and education. She is also sympathetic to her students. Maybe she sees them as part of the child she lost. I have to say Amy Adams is an exceptional actress. She's great in her role as Dr. Louise Banks and gives our performance of outstanding purpose and emotional outpouring. When the aliens arrive for the first time in the skies, displayed to the world on our television screens, humanity goes into a state of panic, and we are left wondering if our full-scale military encounter can be avoided between the squabbling nations of the planet Earth and our out-of-Earth's world guests. The aliens are called Heptapods. They're an insect-type octopus-like creature, and the appearance of them is unsettling at first sight, with their strange-shaped hands, and a vulgarity to the rest of their form that perpetuates a menace. The only way they seem able to communicate with mankind are through an intricate form of artistic numeric shapes and hieroglyphs, smearing them against a screen of transparent glass. I found there was a more restrained attitude within Arrival. Unlike others in its ilk, there's no massive battle as the scenes, no destruction of cities with the inevitable exploding buildings and natural disasters, and no exploding a spaceship starting amongst the Earth's atmosphere. I thought this approach helped a lot with the grounding component of Arrival's narrative. With our top-notch stellar cast, including Forest Whitaker as the stern, non-nonsense armed forces commander, Michael Selbara as the interfering government official, a timer as General Shang, and a creepy musical score by the talented Jan Johansson. The movie edged along with our measured degree of intensity and threat. Arrival delves deeply into the contact aspect between aliens and mankind as drive Louise Banks, Amy Adams, an expert in language communication, is called upon by the authorities to work on various translation techniques to understand and befriend the heptapods. She does this with a varied degree of success. But there are the military generals of the world in the background, wanting her to fail in her task. And in our reality, most of them are nothing more than a bunch of trigger-happy warmongers. And so when we look at ourselves in the world today with the permanent destruction that surrounds us, be it war or the financial state of the faltering banks, it does make me wonder what indeed would happen if we had to join forces to combat an alien threat. I think Arrival gets the balance right. Mankind would probably be ineffective. We'd spend all of our time trying to destroy each other instead of preventing our own destruction or annihilation. Arrival is a mature and naturally a handsome sci-fi movie. At times, It captured the real heart of what a communication may ultimately be like here between us and an alien force if these occurrences transpired around the skeezer of our fragile planet Earth, and how humanity would probably fail to have any kind of cohesive response. Maybe the real enemy wouldn't be from aliens if they appeared from space, but from mankind's own stupidity, recklessness, and megalomania. Denis Villeneuve's elegant sci-fi thriller Arrival contains one of the most deeply thoughtful messages of any film this year. Like Villeneuve's breakthrough a masterpiece in Uns, the central message here is a desperate call for solidarity. While in Uns addressed how absurd it is to hate on one another based on our religious differences, Arrival pleads for the unification of humanity through a world peace among nations and races. The film couldn't be timelier. This into your ordinary alien invasion film. In fact, Arrival is more interested in asking questions about us than them. So many world conflicts stem from a miscommunication. The slightest misunderstanding could have dire consequences, be it between races, nations, individuals, or in this case, intergalactic visitors. Instead of jumping to conclusions and taking action, the film argues we should converse more clearly. Emotional transparency is vital in creating our deeper connection amongst one another. What I find most fascinating is how Villeneuve communicates the importance of clarity of language through the universal and visual language of film. Much of the film revolves around the public's desperate need to finding answers regarding the nature of the arrival. Are they tourists, invaders, or are educators? As the mystery drags on, the world begins to fall into complete chaos. We live in a world that demands immediate answers, for we fear the unknown. Villeneuve sophisticatedly practices this notion by integrating it into his masterful filmmaking. He understands that less is more, and what we don't see is often scarier than what we do see. It takes the film in nearly 30 minutes, for example, to reveal the alien spacecraft and its occupants. By teasing viewers with what is left out of the screen, Villeneuve grips viewers and forces us to use our imagination. We become as eager and impatient as the desperate characters in the film. When we do finally meet the extraterrestrials, it comes with a sense of wonder and awe. Amy Adams plays the linguistics specialist in charge of communicating with the aliens. Both the character and the actress herself understand the importance of body language in communication. Adams' performance evokes some unique emotion without relying too heavily on our dialogue. The subtlety of her acting gives her this nuanced film a cumulative resonating emotional power. If she's the heart of the film, then Jeremy Renner is the brain and Forest Whitaker the muscle. The former actor plays the role of a theoretical physicist and the latter an army general. Through their interactions, we encounter distinctively different approaches to a given situation. Apparently, director Denis Villeneuve and screenwriter Eric Heiser created a fully functioning visual language for the aliens. Everything about the film feels plausible and well thought out. According to astrophysicist Andy Howell, the film does a great job at depicting physicists, linguists, and possibly alien life. Grounded in reality, the devastating pace succeeds at unraveling an overwhelmingly awe-inspiring spectacle, which is no easy feat with a genre audiences exposed to right about everything nowadays. I was reminded of the first time we took a glimpse at our dinosaur in Jurassic Park, the first two appearance of the monolith in 2001, A Space Odyssey, and the sweeping shot showcasing the Titanic from bow to stern. The poetic cinematography accompanied by Joan Johansson's haunting score is a thing to behold. What I found extraordinary about Arrival is how everything comes together nicely and neatly at the end or beginning. Later me explain. The structure of the plot itself is very well rounded, and I mean that in a very literal sense. The film explains how the aliens' perception of time is evident in the way they construct sentences and words. Unlike our linear way of writing, the aliens in the film write sentences in circular fashion. What that means is the sentence here has no beginning or end. Their awareness of time is correspondingly circular. Time for them is like a flat circle that constantly loops. There is no past, a present, and future. The genius of Villeneuve is how he applies it to the structure of the actual film. Arrival has no beginning or end. Notice how the story begins where it ends and ends where it begins. The film not only discusses complex theories about time, but also exemplifies it by creating a circular sequence of events. Embarking on the mounting steps of Renner's hypnotic structure is assured to leave viewers spellbound. I watched Arrival 2016A starring Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner last night. I'm doing some research for our short story I'm writing, and trying to talk to aliens is a big part of it. The original novel and screenplay were written by Ted Chiang, whose name I recognized because I recently reviewed his short story anthology Exhalation. I didn't like it very much, and I enjoyed the movie a lot better. I should say I even recognized the name of director Denis Villeneuve, and having looked him up I realized it was from his work on Blade Runner 2049A 2017. The movie isn't fast-paced at all, which makes sense if it's written by Chiang. He has the sort of mind that loves solving puzzles and delving into intellectual mysteries, but not so much a lot of fire explosions and car or spaceship chases. Big alien ships arrive at different points of the globe. Eventually, a linguist, Louise Banks Adams, is teamed up with physicist Ian Donnelly Renner to go to the Montana site and attempt contact with them. Forest Whitaker plays the air military liaison, Colonel Weber, who is trying to give them every type of help, but he's responsible for reporting to our military-industrial complex. So, his hands are sort of tied. Banks gets the jump on linguists at the other global sites by introducing written language here, since she doesn't have a hope of replicating their vocalizations. As information slowly becomes clearer, it seems as if the aliens want to pit the different nations against each other. The idea is that one world leader is easier to deal with than a whole bunch of them. That results in China's General Shanghai shutting down communications with the rest of their teams and delivering an ultimatum to the aliens: leave our territory or go to war. Louise thinks there's a different interpretation. Part of that is based on her dreams and visions of her daughter Hannah. Forming a close bond with Ian, the two explore the alien language and thought. But ultimately it's Louise who has to go to alone. In part, this is due to a rogue group in the military who planted a bomb on the alien ship. The aliens save Louise and Ian just in time, but at the loss of one of their own. The ship rises a half a mile overhead, but doesn't leave. With all the other nations having broken off contact, and with China and several other countries on the verge of war, Louise is desperate to resolve the conflict. The aliens send a shuttle for her, and in her last contact with them, she learns everything else. The aliens do not experience time as linear, and as Louise has immersed herself in their language, her thoughts and dreams have also become unstuck in time. She remembers the future, and from that knows what she has to do in the present by contacting Chiang on his private number and saying something to him she learned only from a future memory. Once Chiang de-escalates, so does the rest of the world. And what Louise learned ultimately brings humanity closer to unification. She had been remembering her future marriage to Ian, the daughter they had together, and her tragic terminal illness that will take her life at age 12. Somehow, that's all worth it, though. And although we win, there's our tragic undertone to not only the ending, but the entire movie. It's not exactly as satisfying for that reason, but it forms a complete story that describes the fabric of life, the happy threads among the sad. I'm sure real linguists would watch this movie and point out all the mistakes, but I don't have that expertise. I was okay with the 1 hour 56 in YouTube experience, but couldn't have taken more of I Love You Hannah, but you're going to die. Before getting started with my review of Denis Villeneuve's Arrival, I would like to take a quick moment to address some website housekeeping. This review marks my 400th article on Cinephiles. This tiny blog I began almost 2 years ago. Incidentally, today I also saw the site surpass 100,000 site views. I understand 100,000 seems minuscule in a worldwide internet environment, but given the large number of outlets for movie reviews and entertainment news online, it is a number I never expected to reach. I began Cinephiles on a whim to put my movie obsession to words. I didn't expect much from it, but it has provided me with opportunities that have been exciting and fulfilling. In short, I would like to extend my thanks to all of you who have indulged me in my cinematic passion. Whether this is the first time you have stumbled upon my site or have become a frequent visitor, even if all you want is a letter grade for Arrival and you want me to shut up and get to the point, I thank you for your time. Arrival on multiple levels is our story about the understandings and misunderstandings inherent with a language. The two language experts, Louise and Ian, Jeremy Renner, have our primary goal of communicating with the aliens, but they also must contend with a host of obstacles at the hands of interpersonal communication with the government officials. The narrative of Arrival may not be what is expected from an alien invasion movie, but it is surprisingly compelling all the same. There is an intelligence to its determined slowness and sense of inevitability, even ignoring the social commentary about a fragmented world that is so inadequate in dealing with the global occurrence, which itself is quite effective. The story's fundamental building blocks are pretty great. A near-pivotal late movie plot reveal does lead to a questionable resolution, one that will certainly be divisive due to its ramifications on the whole of the plot. This said, there is enough that is tangibly intriguing before it to make it hard to dismiss the entire film. Speaking physically as opposed to tonally, the film is very dark. Places expected to be light are heavy in our shadows. Places meant to be dark are lead soft and blue. This type of aesthetic can often come across as drab. Here it is more fitting. It is ominous yet strangely non-threatening. Just as the towering alien craft appears from the outside, the introduction to the interior of the craft is cinematically full. Manipulations of depth and extreme long-shot scales create an environment that is intense. Absolutely beautiful cinematography makes a dark and empty space feel vibrant and full of emotion. Cinematographer Bradford Young does a magnificent job. The score of the film is similar. It is an intrusive element in the best possible way. When it is present, it is present, but this aids heavily in the creation of mood. The film has a wonderful sense of tone as it relates to its technical aspects. Villeneuve has succeeded again at creating a film that is both cinematic and narratively strong. It falters with a certain plot point that may or may not turn off audiences, but the story has interesting facets to it. It is a science fiction fans must see. Based on the trailer alone, I thought Arrival was mostly about a band of alien ships arriving on Earth, our resulting attempts to communicate with them and the threat of a global war. This is certainly the core of the film, but the storyline shares equal time with the second plot, the personal story of Louise Banks, a brilliant linguist played by Amy Adams. It's risky for a sci-fi movie to pull the viewer into an unexpected commentary on the human experience. If the message feels heavy-handed, hastily constructed, or cheesy, it kinda sink the rest of the film. Banks' backstory surrounds the death of her daughter from a rare disease and our marriage that fell apart from the resulting strain. The movie later reveals that what we assumed were flashbacks are actually foreshadowing. The aliens give her the ability to see the future. All of those distressing moments in her life haven't happened yet. At the end of the movie, after Banks saves humanity, she faces our decision. Should she begin the relationship that leads to her daughter's birth and premature death? Why? Knowing the grief that lies ahead, would she choose the same future? Putting aside the ethical debate of whether to give life to a human being doomed to prematurely suffer and die, the movie affirms the truism that I have only gradually come to realize myself. Life is not a means to an end. Happiness instead is often found in small unexpected moments, and a major part of being happy is the ability to recognize and embrace those moments when they occur. Through final flash-forward scenes, we see some of the warm moments that await Banks and her family to be, which juxtapose the sadness and lead her to choose the same path. Whether or not director Denis Villeneuve set out to make this point explicitly or whether it was expressed in the original short story by Ted Chiang, I'm not sure. But the sentiment or something close to it is surely there. Though Arrival's creators couldn't have predicted the world's current geopolitical state when they were making the movie, their release timing was stunningly prescient. The aliens arrive in 12 large cylindrical probes scattered across the globe. The United States, China, and Russia each play host to a ship, forcing the world's superpowers to grudgingly coordinate their efforts to make contact. But our problem soon becomes apparent. Why speaks for Earth? And what happens if one nation makes an impulsive move, endangering the rest of humanity? It's an interesting question, and I don't recall any debate moderators asking Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump how they would handle such a scenario. In our way, Arrival's plotline is more plausible than that of The Martian. Don't get me wrong, I thought The Martian was fantastic. But whenever I saw the beautiful spaceship Hermes, I wondered who had tripled NASA's budget. And now with another possible Moon versus Mars commercial versus government human spacey flight scuffle on the horizon as well as a potential funding slash for NASA, it's hard not to feel pessimistic about the chances of sending astronauts to Mars anytime soon. Though Arrival is based on the unlikely probability that we will be contacted by aliens, It plays on the hope that a single precipitating event could alter the course of human history, hopefully for the better. This also happens to be one of the reasons we explore our solar system and the universe. Could the discovery of past or our present life beyond Earth have the same effect? Well, they haven't landed. Actually, it's more like they were hovering. 12 gigantic egg-like ships area suspended just above the ground at our strategic points around the globe. And every 18 hours, a doorway opens at the bottommost point of each craft to let curious scientists in for a face-to-face with their otherworldly visitors. You see, these huge mysterious creatures glide through a milky mist on the other side of some kind of transparent wall in the ship's interior. They click, ping, knock, and moan in what must be some kind of language. But try as they might, the science guys can make neither heads nor tails of it. What's more frustrating, especially to the anxious generals and nail-biting governmental officials who watch nervously from a nearby equipment stuffed tents, is that no one can figure out how to get the error questions across either. And they have many. Where do you come from is one for that matter. What do you want is another a good one. Of course, some of the more squinty types are wondering if we should be laying out welcome mats or punching in access codes for our nukes. That's when Dr. Louise Banks is summoned. These a brilliant American linguistics professor gets tapped by the US government to enter a local alien spacecraft and see what she can do to bridge the communication gap. She's tasked along with an advanced mathematician expert named Ian Donnelly with making sense of the large black Rorschach-like splotches so that these space visitors emit. Banks and Donnelly may be well versed in the latest equations and language concepts. They may feel perfectly comfortable with everything from Arabic to algebra, Cantonese to calculus. But how does someone become fluent in alien clinks and squirts? When an advanced alien species swoops into hover at points around the globe, the first reaction by some, especially the Russians and Chinese, is to spool up their armed forces and take aim at the invaders. But Louise and Ian are determined to do everything possible to keep things from degenerating into a warfare. So, they work tirelessly at trying to break the communication code. They step out of their protective outfits in spite of potential danger to better reach out to the aliens. They even risk being shot by their own troops in an effort to get another government's leader to veer from a violent path. Personally, Louise struggles with the wrenching grief of losing her daughter Hannah to a terminal illness. We see multiple flashbacks to that effect. Despite that emotional agony though, Louise makes it clear that the joys and rewards of their relationship while her daughter was still alive far outweigh her pain. Louise and Hannah both profess their deep love for one another. In that fact, Louise reflects on the painful things of life and says, despite knowing the journey and where it leads, I embrace it and I welcome every memento of it. A news report states that our Pentecostal group has burned its church and that members have committed suicide, thinking that the aliens are a sign of the end times. Louise's husband embraces her while they're both fully clothed and asks if she wants to make a baby. After the alien crafts arrive, panicked people to start riot and loot in the streets. We see folks smashing storefronts and wreaking havoc. We also witness large military and naval formations moving into place in anticipation of attack. An explosion results in at least a near casualty. Guns are fired off camera and in another scene brandished menacingly. We hear that the Russian government executed an ear of its experts in an effort to keep certain secrets hidden. We see Hannah own her deathbed as she succumbs to our terminal illness. One F word along with one use each of bar and H. Characters exclaim, oh my god, once or twice. Louise drinks a wine. An army doctor gives both Lucy and Ian some kind of system strengthening booster shot that it's suddenly implied could cause the hallucinations. Someone vomits. Television and on-linear commentators foment unrest among the viewers. Arrival is yet another film about mankind's first contact with our super-advanced civilization that we have long imagined to be out there. But this version is a little different. There is no Independence Day like Bim Bam Boom here. No little green men or giant robots with laser eyes either. In fact, this intelligent, multi-layered pick is likely not what you're expecting it to be at all. Instead, it's a compelling, well-written film that prompts viewers to think less about our imagined fantasies of faraway stars and far more about the things we cherish most deeply. The film talks of the grief and pain of our life and the human capacity to keep choosing to love and to sacrifice for others in spite of that anguish. So, just how does a sci-fi film about our human linguistics expert visiting with the aliens that communicate through clicks, knocks, squirts of ethereal ink, And a room-shaking bass notes do all that? Well, I can't tell you without giving it too much away. But I will say that our couple of light but unfortunate contender wormholes in this movie's space-time continuum, namely a smattering of harsh or profanity, could well make parents pause before beaming young kids into theater seats. As for the rest of us, well, 2 clicks, 4 knocks, and a bass rumbly mean, would you like butter with your popcorn? They look like deflated footballs compressed into oblong frisbee shapes. 12 UFOs hover over nondescript locations around the planet without our proclamation of war or peace, no ultimatums, and no understanding of our language whatsoever. Rather than float over major cities, they linger over locations such as an empty field in Montana, over the Black Sea, or in Siberia. They stand 1,500 feet high on their ends, with one end just a few dozen feet away from the Earth's surface. Just there, a door opens where scientists and paranoid military officials enter to make contact. Human representatives around the world preserve their team's exchanges with the visitors jealously, although they're all looking for answers to the same question: what is your purpose on Earth? But answers in Arrival do not come here without some searching, introspection, abstract thought, and solemn emotion. And that's one of the best things about it. Journeyman director Denis Villeneuve brings his expert craftsmanship to author Ted Chiang's short story of Year Alive from 1998. Villeneuve's films such as Prisoners 2013 and Sicario 2015 find the filmmaker disappearing into their material and like a chameleon changing his aesthetic style to serve the story with a meticulous approach. Although the formal qualities of his work have a pristine and precious quality regardless of the material, his measured pacing often keeps the viewer at a distance. However, screenwriter Eric Iser's an adaptation bonds us with the rival's protagonist, linguistics expert Louise Banks from the first scenes. Amy Adams plays Louise with wounded perseverance and deeply affecting our humanity, lending several otherwise awe-inspiring sequences from throughout the film an unexpected intimacy. Indeed, when audiences think of science fiction or UFOs or they see the spacecraft in Arrival, they will probably think of Independence Day 1996. And yes, both films feature several similarly shaped ships docking around the planet. But Arrival isn't the mindless blockbuster type in which monuments explode and pyrotechnics incendia airliners and popcorn-munching escapism. In fact, for a major studio release, the result is surprisingly introspective and existential for Louise and thus the audience. Viewers should expect something more akin to Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind 1977 or Robert Zemeckis' Contact 1997 wherein a mysterious voyage of language barriers and psychic influence leads to profound personal revelations. To be sure, the methods and themes of Arrival carry an essential antidote to today's antagonistic strife form of human interaction. After the visitors establish themselves around the planet, Louise receives a visit from Connor Webber, Forest Whitaker, an Army intelligence official who plays her recording of alien voices. The sounds consist of clicks and tones comparably to whale song, nothing she can't translate. She soon finds herself alongside scientist Ian Donnelly, Jeremy Renner, who believes math and science are universal languages, as part of our government operation to open a line of meaningful communication with the aliens in the Montana craft. Entering the monolithic spaceship dubbed the Shell in bright orange hazmat suits, the team finds their understanding of physics challenged in the ship's unique gravitational environment, followed by the appearance of the aliens themselves. Named Heptapods for their 7 legs and cephalopod-esque appearance, the aliens look like upright hands standing on the tips of their fingers, but they remain behind a clear barrier immersed in a cloudy gas. Louise cannot hope to speak their language and instead communicates through a written form. Even so, their language does not consist of letters or even characters. Rather, they deliver inky messages in the form of black near-circle displays as though Jackson Pollock painted a coffee ring. Each ring represents a complicated sentence of multiple connotations. Whereas most earthly languages rely on a comparatively simple structure of letters, words, sentences, paragraphs, and so on. Although the second act conveniently leaps over how Louise and Ian decipher the aliens' Inca language, the discoveries provide ample commentary on human beings' general unwillingness to understand another person, culture, race, or way of thinking different from their own. Humans want things basic, simple, and uncomplicated. And when large human groups have to think, especially in terms they do know to understand, they become frustrated, angry, and impatient. Such a resounding, ambitious subtext could threaten to undermine the human element of the story, but Louise remains the focus throughout Arrival. Adams delivers a performance of thoughtful humanity. Her presence calibrated to match Villeneuve's concentration on inward stillness and contemplation, both of self and the greater situation. Regardless of how incongruous such a notion would seem for a sci-fi picture, it works. And Louise's personal pain and her openness to non-linear thinking, largely in flashes to images in her mind, provide a crucial perspective to solve the film's puzzle. The turns throughout the story prove deceptively linear and focused. Viewers may even want to return to the film to look for clues after they realize how the puzzle works. Fortunately, Arrival connects the puzzle to its narrative and protagonist in affecting unexpected ways that build everything on screen and avoid reducing the story structure to a gotcha. Curious but effective tonal modulations and booming sounds from composer Jon Johansson make up the score, lending an eerie sound to the music and atmosphere to the picture. But if there are any major faults in Arrival, they reside in a couple of distracting visual choices. First, Louise enters the alien craft to inside their specific atmosphere at a near point, and the CGI created a weightlessness leaves Adam's hair looking like cartoon dancing worms. The effects in this sequence may be the solely moment I was removed from the story. Second, cinematographer Bradford Younger shoots in a distracting amount of far close-ups, aside from some occasional sweeping shots of the shell. Undoubtedly, this choice was to enhance the film's more intimate story elements in juxtaposition with the international scale. But the viewer cannot help but wonder if Villeneuve has catered his visual style to meet the needs of contemporary viewers accustomed to watching TV or movies on their smartphones. Nevertheless, Arrival remains an unlikely sort of sci-fi drama less about aliens and spaceships than the experiential and intangible qualities of our life, emotion, and memory. How strange that a $50 million genre production featuring major stars and a wide theatrical release would contain themes about clear communication that resonate in such personal ways. Moreover, this is a quiet film devoid of shouting or a barrage of explosions, the type of film where the audience remains silently absorbed throughout. Its general decibel level hums along softly, requiring viewers to focus and become captivated. At the center of that captivation is Adams' incredible performance and Villeneuve's careful detailed approach, both cerebral and achingly emotional. Arrival sustains a message about hope and understanding for a better humanity that our audiences may need right now. The movie released in 2016 didn't reveal much when the trailers were dropped, creating a mystery of a film that led audiences to believe that it was some sort of mix between an all-out alien invasion thriller and a film about communication between humans and alien languages. While in a very basic way describing it as this wouldn't be incorrect, it is still far more than simply a hybrid between two distinctive genres. From the beginning, where it depicts Dr. Louise Banks' memory of her daughter growing up and eventually dying of cancer, audiences realized that this was going to draw far deeper emotionally than we expected. With repeat viewings, we have seen this 4 times. The director has left little clues for us to pick up on as something more than what is shown on the surface. It can be as little a touch as the style of how the spaceship is balanced to something as massive as figuring out the aliens' way of far communication. If one simply peels the onion little by little on each detail and stylistic choice, you will discover a whole new world of cinematic magic. As Lucy finds her role to perform as a linguist to decipher the aliens' language, she finds a major difference between our language and theirs. We communicate in our sentences whilst they communicate in our circles, expressing their thoughts in one instance. This also means that the Heptapods aliens differ in how they are not only language but time. As humanity writes and talks, it matches the way we see time passing, experiencing every single moment one after the other in our slow methodical succession as each word comes out of our minds. This concept becomes truly intriguing when we take in other parts of our own lives into it. Our past is obviously already known despite some flaws in memory. The present is becoming known at every moment, and the future is a vast world of far unpredictability slowly waiting to become a part of our present and past. On the other hand, the Heptapods communicate in circles, meaning that their perception of past, present, and the future is all the same, equally known and remembered. At first, Louise reminisces of her daughter's life and death, but then an idea called the superworth hypothesis comes into consideration. This theory principally explains that if you immerse yourself in learning a foreign language enough, you can literally rewire your brain. It sounds like a drill, but it actually works towards this film's benefit. In other words, the language you speak equals how you think. Mysterious, am I right? That your brain could actually be hardwired differently depending on the language you speak. Not only this, but it can also change your perception or how you see everything. However, as she continues to learn the circle language, the movie makes it clear that the past to all Louise's memories of her daughter is actually the future. I'll talk about how emotionally devastating this realization is later, but just take a second to think about this. The future is now remembered as much as her past, and it's only through this new language, the superworth hypothesis, that she realizes this. With the Heptapods language, Louise has learned to transcend the arrow of time that we all live in. The arrow of time is basically just living a life in a normal way, slowly catapulting it towards inevitable death, remembering the past, living the present, and trying to predict the future. Transcending it means you have broke free of everyday life and past, present, and future have collided in one beautifully indecipherable yet completely understandable explosion of time. Like here the aliens' language, the film's storytelling is circular instead of linear, coming to a full close at the end. When she hugs Jeremy Renner's character at the finale, it represents her choosing to embrace the joys and sorrows of the life she knows will live. Another thing that becomes truly apparent while drawing deep on the superior-worth hypothesis is how depressing and emotionally painful it is to live it. Louise may have saved the aliens from being wrongfully attacked by humanity, but she forgot her own mental well-being. All the memories of her daughter's birth, life, and tragic younger death, coupled with her husband leaving her to live out her sorrows alone, all things that will happen in her future. She has to go through life knowing that her daughter will die of cancer, and the man she loves, who we find out is Jeremy Renner's character, leaves them both. Just thinking about how all the joys and beauty of being a mother will be sucked out by the pain of knowledge is tragic to think about. And though it proves once again how Denis Villeneuve uses heartbreaking material in a subtly way that isn't necessarily easy to decipher. People have criticized his films for being emotionless, especially a Blade Runner 2049. But simply because you have to crack the puzzle to find the true heartbreak in Arrival or his other masterpieces doesn't mean there isn't any. This is a beautiful film, and I'm not just talking about the cinematography or visual effects, but the feelings this makes you evoke is profound if you look deep enough. Another aspect that this movie nails is the foreshadowing of the immense change that will come in Louise's life. Watching the film on our first viewing, seeing Louise walk down our circular hallway doesn't really mean anything. But on second viewing, it is juxtaposed with the previous shot of Louise walking in a straight line. It foreshadows the way she will eventually think in the future, utterly aligned with the aliens' thoughts. By the end of the film, just like the main character, audiences too have come to see Arrival as Louise has come to see her life. It's only on a rewatch in which we experience the true significance and beauty of each and every moment. The language of the Heptapods represents the full circle that this movie has come before the end credits. Key to understanding the film's underlying themes of meaning and interpretation. Philosophers refer to this as the hermeneutic circle. I had to look up the definition of this, which explains that the whole defines the parts as the parts define the whole. Oh yeah. We're getting super philosophical here. Part and wholly are working together to form the true meaning of any sort of text. These basically means that to understand our specific part of something, you must figure out the whole before. The main conflict in the story of this movie, which is questioning the purpose of the Heptapods' arrival, creates a crisis that solidifies this theory. Primarily it focuses on Louise's interactions with one singular ship. The larger conflict surrounds what to do with the total of 12 heptapod ships located in random places around the globe. This leads the 12 nations in which the ships landed into collaborate and share progress with each other. However, much to the distaste to many countries, when enough of their language is learned to ask their purpose on Earth, their response was translated to offer weapon. The heptapod's ultimate sign for true purpose is represented through past human experiences. This specifically relates to Louise's memories. In a powerfully metaphorical and climactic moment, Louise is actually invited to write with their language on the glass screen that separates them from the aliens. which causes her to experience rapid flashes of more memoria before a cloud of signs suddenly erupts. As I mentioned right before, a cloud of signs erupts directly after Lucy experiences flashes of these new memories. If you paid a little attention, you may notice that clouds are a visual motif in the movie or imagery that keeps repeating itself throughout the film. After Amy Adams and Jeremy Renner analyzed the new burst of data they received, it's found out that the empty incomplete space reveals the incompleteness of Louise's knowledge of their language. The positions of their ships are in fact not random. The Heptapods have strategically placed their ships in these 12 places to make a puzzle of sorts for Louise to crack. But she needs the other 11 pieces of the puzzle. It requires teamwork between these nations to bring the parts together to make a cohesive whole out of their scattered language. It sends a beautiful message about unification no matter where you are in the world. View to it also as symbolism for a clock, which of course reverts back to my points about the parts and whole of time. Note not only do the nations have to come here together in order to solve this, but Louise herself must piece together the pieces of her timeline to connect the dots. Time is language in this movie, and our language is simply nothing more than a hermeneutic circle by which we interpret anything, albeit in a generic and unimaginative way. Unfortunately, our languages are the boundaries in the world we live in. It creates obstacles and limits in which you cannot cross in fear of breaking the norms. Languages keep us a united society, but they also keep us caved by missed opportunities. Another way one could look at all of this that the present language we use represent the limitations of our memories. We cannot remember everything that's happened in the past. Our present language has made this an impossible achievement. Language is the end result of a past experience. So, even learning an alien language will not allow Lucy to fully remember a future she has not yet lived. However, she can really predict what's going to happen next as any of us can, which is almost like rewatching this movie. The circular language of the Heptapods is obviously a representative of the film's unique circular way in which it chooses to tell its story. The Heptapods ship really represents the entirety of Louise's life, which is probably the primary reason why the position of the spaceship is different than most depictions of alien arrivals. Based on several analyses that I have watched on this film, it's really no secret that these alludes or references to the Black Monolith in 2001, A Space Odyssey. This monolith may seem like it appears in random places at random times, but it's actually a symbol of human evolution. It appears whenever humanity is at some breaking point in evolution, the beginning of all mankind, man's movement into space, and finally at the main character's deathbed and place of birth. Similarly, the tunnel at the end of the ship in Arrival represents death, and the quick flashes of memories that Louise sees to be associated with the flashes a person who's on their deathbed receives right before they move on. This all brings things full circle, and I hope this analysis was found to be helpful. Do you know what makes Arrival a beautiful film to watch? It's a simplicity. The simplicity in its concept, direction, and execution which may feel familiar but is completely different from what you normally see. Arrival takes something so grand and far-reaching and yet speaks volumes on how we view the world today. Its ultimate message so clear and precise. It's how we take that on board to shape our future. Arrival is an unconventional sci-fi film. Why unconventional? Well, imagine a typical alien invasion movie. Hollywood as of late, whether it's Independence Day, both original and its sequel, Battle Los Angeles, any of the Transformers films or Skyline, for example, have always relied on a spectacle. We want to be dazzled and amazed both visually and technically. We watch as aliens showcase their full destructive power. Whether we're viewing it on an IMAX screen or in the comforts of our own homes, they always get their landmarks, a line which Independence Day Resurgence boasts as our capital cities are given an extensive remodeling job. In our popcorn heaven delight, we witness mankind fight back with all our military muscle as we lose ourselves in our guilty pleasure fantasies. It's not to say there's anything wrong with those films with exception of our Transformers because they are all bad. But those films miss a vital ingredient that makes an impact and connection with the audience. Heart. and purpose. The real beauty of an alien invasion film when done properly is not the aliens themselves or their power. They are merely antagonists bringing to light the choices humanity must face. How do we react? How do we coexist or fight back? What would you do? This aspect becomes our sacrificial neglect for films which rely solely on the visual spectacle. It means that we don't get involved in the predicaments characters face and they are missing a trick. It is our connection with human nature that allows us to follow characters as they face those enticing yet explorative questions. It's why a certain number of sci-fi films have become more than just films. They shed their cult status or initially poor and misguided reviews. They evolve into a new creation. They become iconic. They become endearing. They become legendary. Arrival certainly belongs in that crowd and caps off what has been a phenomenal return of brilliant yet thought-provoking sci-fi films back on our screens. So, how does Arrival set itself apart? Well, first of all, it doesn't follow the traditional method and response of what a typical alien invasion films fall into. It doesn't respond with a shoot first to ask later mantra. It doesn't respond with an alien threat to wipe out our humanity and our natural resources like a bootstepping on a colony of ants. Arrival merely wants to understand what a first contact would be like. It presents it as an unnerving and uncomfortably experience thanks to the brilliant soundtrack by Jon Johansson. Arrival debunks and removes one assumption that some invasion films have how aliens communicate with the human race. Obviously, it's not intentional. Most alien invasion films make an arrogant assumption that aliens speak English or certainly understand Earth language. Why are they here? What is their purpose? Where are they from? When dealing with an unknown threat and entity, these are important questions that immediately come to mind. But in order to get to that point, we need to understand them. Arrival intelligently deconstructs the concept of language, breaking it down and simplifying it, like how parents would teach children words. Communicative language is restructured and repurposed into something tangible. By doing this, it breaks down barriers by promoting our trade-off between the species. This has been a trying week in a lot of ways for America. In the wake of the 2016 presidential election, the Americana people find themselves confronted with our gulf separating them from their fellow citizens and overwhelming apathy towards both politics and that massive divide. It's putting it lightly that this has been a rough one. The election has spotlighted the turmoil, global geopolitical strife, and the unreliability of polling in regards to the voice of much of the country. Fierce on both sides of the aisles, mistrust, and flat-out hate going unrecognized and unrest. In more ways than one, many of the problems we're facing both as our country and members of the human race here can be boiled down to trust, fear, and communication. Many of the most pressing issues we deal with as a planet day to day have their roots in the ways in which those concepts intermingle horribly in the ways in which communication breaks down. With that in mind, I can think of no better film through which to examine humanity's strengths, failings, and potential than Denis Villeneuve's 2016 first contact sci-fi film, Arrival. The film begins with a short, heartbreaking sequence that left me stunned before the aliens even arrived. And the lighting a fast switch to the larger story at play expertly sets the tone for the film at once intensely personal and universal in our consequence. The premise of the film, like many greater pieces of science fiction, is straightforward enough. 12 mysterious and towering ships have suddenly appeared around the world and are simply hovering in place above the ground, nicknamed shells. The purpose of the mysterious objects, the reason behind their global landing locations, and whether they are carrying living beings remain unknown. When the United States military enters one of these alien shells and discovers something beyond human understanding, unfamiliar physics and extraterrestrial beings with whom they cannot communicate, they turn to two specialists for help. Those experts are linguistics professor Louise Banks, played brilliantly by Amy Adams, and theoretical physicist Ian Donnelly, portrayed by Jeremy Renner. Louise is given one crucial mission: to find the answer to a simple but profound question: what is your purpose on Earth? Meanwhile, Ian's role is to assist her while also trying to understand how these beings arrived on our planet. Arrival quickly became one of the best films of 2016, an impressive achievement in a year that also delivered remarkable films like The Witch and Swiss Army Man. The reason is clear. Arrival is a masterfully crafted cinematic experience, adapted from Ted Chiang's 1998 short story Story of Your Life by screenwriter Eric Heisserer. The film delivers a deeply emotional and thought-provoking science fiction story unlike anything else in recent years, featuring a powerful musical score by Hansen and stunning cinematography by Bradford Young, whose previous work includes Selma and Ain't Them Bodies Saints. The film perfectly complements director Denis Villeneuve's deeply personal and emotional storytelling style. The pacing may feel slower than what some mainstream audiences are accustomed to, but every moment serves a purpose. Villeneuve knows exactly when to slow down and allow a scene to breathe, and when to build intensity. This is the work of a filmmaker with complete control over his vision. Arrival contains enough powerful ideas, emotional moments, and science fiction concepts to fill multiple films. At its heart, the story is not simply about aliens, it is about how humanity responds when faced with something completely unknown. The United States is not the only nation dealing with the arrival of these mysterious spacecraft. 12 locations around the world are affected, and countries must work together to understand the alien visitors, discover their intentions, and decide how to respond. However, cooperation is difficult. Nations disagree on the best approach. China prepares for a possible attack, while the United States chooses diplomacy and communication. The greatest challenge is that many countries are unwilling to share all the information they have gathered. This is a rare science fiction film where a translator is the hero, and there may be no better metaphor for our modern world. Arrival understands that communication is not just about language, it is about trust, empathy, and the ability to understand one another. Villeneuve does not hide his aliens from the audience. They are introduced early, shown frequently, and surrounded by a fascinating mythology. Their design, presence, and mystery are handled with incredible creativity. It is one of the most captivating portrayals of an alien species in science fiction since Alien. However, the film is not truly about extraterrestrials. Like the best science fiction stories, the alien element is a vehicle for exploring deeply human issues. At its core, Arrival is a story about communication, relationships, fear, love, and the choices that define our lives. This is a film about ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances. More specifically, it is about one woman and how she carries the enormous responsibility placed upon her shoulders. Amy Adams delivers a remarkable performance as Louise Banks. There is not a weak performance anywhere in the film. Jeremy Renner brings charm and warmth to Ian Donnelly. Forest Whitaker is excellent as always, and the young actors add emotional depth to the story. But Adams is the heart of the film. Her portrayal of Louise is intelligent, vulnerable, determined, and deeply human. She struggles under immense pressure but refuses to give up. Her emotional journey throughout the film is both heartbreaking and inspiring, showing strength, compassion, and resilience in equal measure. Amy Adams gives one of the finest performances of her career, and her work deserved major recognition. She carries the emotional weight of the entire film and makes Louise's journey unforgettable. Arrival is not only an expertly made science fiction film but also a deeply moving exploration of human connection. Denis Villeneuve and his team have created a powerful story about love, loss, grief, mortality, fear, and above all, the importance of communication. In a world filled with division and uncertainty, Arrival offers a message that feels more important than ever. While no single movie can solve humanity's problems, this film reminds us of the value of understanding each other. It gives us a language not just of words, but of empathy that the world desperately needs. Arrival director, Denis Villeneuve. Screenplay, Eric Heiser. Based on Story of Your Life by Ted Chiang. Producer, Sean Levy. Starring Amy Adams, Jeremy Renner, Forest Whitaker. Cinematography, Bradford Young. Editing, Joe Walker. Music, Hansen. Production company, Film Nation Entertainment. Distributor, Paramount Pictures. Release date, September 1, 2016. Running time, 116 minutes. Country, United States. Language, English. Budget, $47 million. Box office, $203 million.